Hi, I'm Kevin Hildebrand, and I am presenting about adult education, andragogy, the ideas about Malcolm Knowles, and how we can apply this as educators. I'm going to bring up my screen share here, and so we can get some information here. Um, there we are. Adult education, andragogy, and its application. So, what do we mean by andragogy? This might be a new word for some of us. In fact, this came up in the Bates readings that we had when we were learning about various learning theories. And andragogy is one of those terms that refers to the teaching of adults rather than children. If we do a little word background here, it comes from a Greek word andros, meaning an adult man specifically. That's the gender of that word. And then the Greek word ago, which means to lead, andros, ago. That is in contrast to pedagogy, which comes from the Greek word paidion, the Greek word for child, and to lead a child is what when we usually use that term pedagogy, we're focusing on teaching in general, but in its strictest term, pedagogy originated talking about teaching children. And then in the mid 20th century, this term of andragogy was really brought to the fore by educator Malcolm Knowles, who really started to bring the science of teaching adults to the fore in educational circles. He's called the father of modern andragogy. He was a professor at Boston University and North Carolina State University, and wrote many books and articles about the subject of adult education and how this both intersects and differs from pedagogy dealing with children. These three books that I listed up here were particularly useful in my research. And one of the things that we can gain from Knowles's research was some unique qualities when we're talking about andragogy. And when we're looking at adult learners, he said that we're talking about people who are focused on lifelong practical learning. There's self-directed learners, and it also has implications for the educator now, who becomes more of a facilitator or a coach and really a fellow learner along with the students themselves. Let's look at a chart that Knowles had in one of his writings that helped differentiate some ideas between pedagogy and andragogy. Now, I'll say right from the beginning, it's almost impossible to have a strict dichotomy between pedagogy and andragogy, because good teaching is good and helpful no matter who your subjects are, whether they're children or adults. But for this purpose, this is how Knowles started to make some differentiation between these. First, let's look over here at these different ideas. First, the concept of learner, and then how it applies to both pedagogy and andragogy, just as a starting point in Knowles's ideas. First of all, in pedagogy, we're often looking at a learner as someone who's dependent on the educator, where the teacher is directing the learning, versus in andragogy, we're looking at a move from a dependent learner to a self-directed learner. Or in our second row, let's talk about the role of experience. And we're talking about the life experience of the student themselves, where often in pedagogy, it's kind of discounted, where instead the transmittal of techniques, being given to the student are a preferable focus. Rather than in andragogy, adult education, we want to draw on the rich resource of experience that the learner brings to his or her learning experience, rather than being a passive learner. The third column, or the third row, readiness to learn, often in pedagogy, learners are treated quite uniformly, where most children, for example, the same age, are basically learning the same things. Whereas in andragogy, learning is rooted in real life experiences, which vary greatly in adult learners. And the teacher is there to help discover what you need to know. Finally, in the last row, the orientation to learning. Often in pedagogy, education is about acquiring content, which will be used later in life. We're going to teach you this now, and then sometime in the future, at an unspecified time, you may be able to use this. And the learning is often subject-oriented. Here is math. Here is writing. Versus andragogy, education is developing increased competence for the learner to achieve his or her full potential. And there's an immediacy to the learning. What we want to teach you today, you can apply tomorrow. It's very, very, the implications are immediate or performance centered. Instead of teaching you writing, we're going to teach you a skill that you can use, like how to write a resume or how to write a job description. Or how to write a proposal. Those are some starting points to differentiate pedagogy and andragogy that Knowles puts forward in his writing. Let's break this down a little bit more and talk about the role of the teacher in adult education. We touched on this just briefly already, but I think it's kind of interesting to look at this evolving role of an educator as more of a facilitator, someone who assists the student in setting goals, someone who interacts with adult students as fellow learners. Maybe some of us, especially in the graduate program, have already experienced that as being adult learners ourselves. Or let's switch the focus and talk about the role of the adult learner, which can be considerably different than the role of a child learner. An adult learner is typically motivated by creating individual goals and then finding ways to achieve them. Self-direction is a term that Knowles uses a lot in his writing about adult learners. They're motivated, very intrinsic motivation. I want to learn this because to achieve one's full potential. That's another phrase that Knowles uses quite often in his description of adult learning. Well, let's talk about how the adult learning process might look. And Knowles summarizes this in a number of ways. First, he says the learning process for adults needs to begin with a self-diagnosis. Where am I coming into this course with? What are things I need to know? How can I evaluate my current skills and abilities? And then step two, having diagnosed myself, how can I plan and create the goals of what I want to learn or what I want to take from this course or this workshop? Step three is where the student draws upon his or her rich resources of life experiences. We're not just starting from scratch here. Everything that I've done already or other things that I've done in my vocation or avocation is going to help inform my learning. And four, the teacher is assisting the student, guiding the student in doing all these things and helping be self-directed all the way through here. I want to apply this to some of the work that I'm currently doing. This is where I am employed, Concordia Theological Seminary, Fort Wayne. This is part of our beautiful campus. I'm the director of music here. There's our beautiful chapel, that tall triangle building right there in the center of our campus. That's the exterior. And here's the interior. I just wanted to share a little bit of both the front of the chapel, and then there's the back with our beautiful organ and balcony where I do a lot of my work. And so already our campus is a specialized grad school. We teach men who are studying to be pastors. We have some other programs for church workers who are studying various other professional vocations within the church. So I'm dealing with adult learners all the time. But in addition to our regular semester courses, we also have a number of ongoing continuing education courses, including every summer I teach several workshops for church organists. That's why I wanted to show the inside of our chapel here. We've been doing this for about 40 years, and this year we have two different workshops based on ability levels. Here's in fact, if you want to check out our website and register, we've got a beginning level, we've got an intermediate and advanced level. The goal and objective of this workshop is for mostly amateur and volunteer organists, many of whom have received little or no training of how to become better players, specifically so they can lead the singing of their congregation better. We spend some information and some time on how to be a better repertoire player, and that's wonderful. But most of all, we talk about how does this machine work, and how can we make our playing technically better in order to encourage singing in the congregation. And so I've got adult learners coming in from all around the country to these workshops. As a side note, sometimes people ask when they know I'm a professional organist and I teach church organists, they'll say, isn't that kind of a dying art? And I always respond, it is in places where people have let it die. But where people encourage it and let it thrive, like at these workshops, it's alive and well. In fact, last year, one of the weeks, every student in the workshop was in their 20s or younger, except for one retired guy, and he was a really good sport about that. And that draws into our drawing out our wealth of experience within our range of students that show up. Really comes into play that way. So I wanted to say, how can I take Knowles' idea and apply it to my workshops for adult learners? Well, the first step in adult learning, Knowles says, is self-diagnosis. And already in our brochure, we have a little bit of a diagnostic tool. This is a little bit from our brochure and our registration information to help students know which level workshop should I go to, basic, intermediate, or advanced, based on their skill levels and how they self-diagnose themselves. And I want to expand this and create a much broader self-diagnostic tool for when the students come into the class, they've evaluated their skills, their abilities, which one of, for instance, we have several settings of the service that they can play. What's their strength in hymn playing? How much do they know about organ terminology? So that then, step two, they can plan and create goals for the week they're here. They're only here for 5 days, and I want to use this time very wisely and be good stewards of their time for them. I always have individual lessons and meeting times with the students, and so what I'd like to do is to use this self-diagnostic tool in our lesson time with each student to help plan and create goals for the week. How am I going to use this time I have here on the campus to decide this is what I'm going to focus on? And reading Knowles helped me quantify and direct this idea. The third step in the student learning experience for adult learners is drawing on the wealth of experience that students come into a class or a workshop with. In fact, there's some research about this. This first bullet point mentions how adult learners have a greater neural network due to more experiences, allowing for more neurological connections to be formed. So there's a lot of research about how the brain works, and actually, the older a student is, the better off he or she is in this regard. I always have one of the evenings on our workshop where we sort of have a question and answer form. And typically, I've had the students ask me and the other instructors questions. But I would like to remodel this and have the students ask more questions of each other. And so in my paper, I'm describing how we're remodeling this so that the students are much more interactive, learning from each other. So the students with more experience can teach those with students with less experience, and vice versa. Those who are more novices can learn from what the more experienced students have done. And then finally, I'd like to expand the scope of our workshop. Knowles really was a fascinating educator, and to his credit, he really kept revising and expanding his view of education. Knowles, as the father of andragogy, never just started with one idea and had one lecture that he gave for 40 years of his career. He kept revising his ideas. He even towards the end of his career said that the learning environment really becomes a system of learning resources. And what does he mean by that? Well, we need to expand how we teach, especially adult learners, beyond the classroom. Um, and so, what this means for me is I would like to create some kind of social media resources where students can network with each other and network with other church music and organ professionals across the country when they go back home. We can have some digital resources for them for repertoire, for technical details about how the instrument works and how to play it better. For instance, there are some material online. This is from a video series that a much younger version of myself recorded several years ago that we can make available online that sort of underscores and repeats what the students have done on our campus for 5 days. This is a way that instead of having just a 5 day workshop, it's a workshop that never ends. And I think that's something that Knowles would have appreciated in his view of ongoing adult education. Really, my takeaway from studying Malcolm Knowles and andragogy, adult education, and applying it to some of the things that I'm already doing as a professional is is really something that we know already as educators, and it's that learning never stops. I love this quote from Knowles, where he said, "We, meaning educators, share a deep dedication to the concept of lifelong learning and a sense of excitement about having a part in bringing about a third wave of humanity, people who value and excel in constant change." I think that's a real great way of maybe giving a bookend on Knowles's philosophy and view of education. He really said that andragogy isn't a specific learning theory, but it's really a whole framework of how we look at people. Really, towards the end of his career, he said that andragogy or adult education is really about just making people's lives better, and we do that by teaching them and equipping them of how to be more self-directed, help how to evaluate what they're doing, how to set goals for themselves, and how to tap into the resources of their own experience and of those around them to benefit their lives and the lives of those around them. And isn't that really all of our goals as music educators, to use music to help improve their lives and the world around us? Those are some of my takeaways about Malcolm Knowles, and I hope you enjoyed and got inspired from that. Thank you all for watching.